things are happening at such a fast pace. So there is not much of an opportunity for you to rest on what you know, like the earlier generation when you finished learning at one phase and then the rest of your life would be applying what you learned. But now that has changed. So I think the most important thing will be to have that ability and hone that ability to learn continuously.
This is The Entrepreneur Way with Neil Ball. Unlocking the secrets of successful entrepreneurs 7 days a week. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Twitter at Neil D. Ball. Napoleon Hill said the power of the mastermind is the driving force. To discover how you can unlock the potential in your business using the power of a mastermind, go to mastermindunlimited.com. And now, here is your host, Neil Ball.
Hello, it's Neil Ball here. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Entrepreneur Way. The Entrepreneur Way is about the entrepreneur's journey, the vision, the mindset, the commitment, the sacrifice, failures and successes. I am so excited to bring you our special guest today, Sam Santhosh. But before I introduce you to Sam, I have a quote for you by Israel Moore Ivor. You are loaded with answers. Don't live your entire life asking questions. The Entrepreneur Way asks the questions, so we all get the insight, inspiration and ideas to apply in our businesses. Sam, welcome to the show. Are you ready to share your version of the Entrepreneur Way with us?
Very much so. I really look forward to sharing my passion in entrepreneurship.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that, Sam. And thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me on the show.
You are welcome. Sam Santhosh is an entrepreneur with more than 25 years of experience in initiating and running successful businesses. Sam is an investor and mentor for many companies. Prior to this, Sam was the CEO and Managing Director of California Software Limited, CalSoft, from 1992 to 2012. He founded CalSoft in 1992, and under his vision, CalSoft grew rapidly from a niche player in the Silicon Valley to a global player with 1,200 employees and presence in 8 countries. Sam, can you provide us with some more insight into your business and personal life to allow us to get to know more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm basically an engineer by training, and then I have done my MBA. And so my first 20 years of my business life was building software companies. I've been an entrepreneur all my life, but it was all in the IT and the software industry for the first 20 years. Only about 8 years back, I decided to move out of that, and I moved out of the software industry and plunged into a new world of biology, and especially focusing on a new area of genomics. So the DNA sequencing started becoming much cheaper and faster. So I used that as a leverage, the new area to build companies in using genomics and the genetic sequence data.
So genomics, is that about working with genetic sequence data and things? Is that what that's about?
Absolutely.
Because I haven't heard that term before, genomics. It's new to me. So going from the software business to genomics, what has you obviously to go from the totally different things? How has that transition been a good transition for you? Because obviously you've got all your skills from the software industry to bring across to genomics, which I assume is probably something to do with what you're doing.
Exactly. So I happened to at the right time because genomics has been, as a field has been there for maybe 30 to 40 years. But the last maybe 10 years, 10 to 15 years saw a big revolution happening in genomics because of new technologies that enabled sequencing the genome. So and getting the data, from the DNA. So from biology or chemistry, you could actually convert the data into bits. So coming from the software industry, that was seemed to me like a very good powerful weapon to have when you are able to look at what we call the source code, the source code of life. Mm-hmm. You're getting access to the source code of life. So though it was a big jump, I felt like it was really worth it. And, the benefits of understanding the source code of life and being able to create businesses out of that, I felt would be very rewarding.
So what do you do with the sequencing of the genome and the source code of life once you've got all this stuff working and you've got it all mapped in your computer?
So that is actually becomes the beginning of the journey because sequencing then turns out to be the easier part. But like you said, now understanding that data and mapping it and making sense out of it turned out to be a much bigger challenge than everybody expected. Mm-hmm. The data is very complex, and because of evolution, it has been a process of 3 billion years when the code got evolved, among the various life forms in Earth. So it has been it's a long journey, and so many changes that happened, and it is not like the unwanted pieces are not cut out because there is nobody working on it. It's a natural evolution. So there is so much useful and unwanted pieces also in it, or unnecessary pieces in it. So trying to make sense out of it is very complex. So and might take even another maybe 30 or 40 years for us to really understand what all the code says.
So is that what you're doing now then? You're trying to still figure it out, or you figured, presumably you must have figured something out, or somebody, I know people have, but how do you make money out of what you're doing?
Yeah, but though it's a long journey, there are initial successes or initial pieces of information that you get which are useful. Yeah. So that helps build the rest of the road. Mm-hmm. So our early understanding of some of the genes and some of the diseases that some changes in these genes are causing have already yielded a lot of benefits in cures to some diseases and understanding many of the other diseases. Even though you may not have a cure for it now, you now understand what caused that disease, and so there is a much better way of handling it or preventing it. So there has been many early wins in the industry through the science. So that has given much more enthusiasm and funding and opportunities for people to build the companies on this.
And do you have a bigger long-term goal with all of this?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. We believe that this data will allow us to not only understand diseases, but also help companies create new drugs and enable the so-called dream of personalized medicine or precision medicine. So these are the new terms that have come up in the last few years, but they are still like a long-term dream. But I think maybe in the next 20, 30 years, we would reach a stage by which most of the currently known diseases can be cured.
What do you enjoy most about what you do?
I really love the excitement, the challenge, especially in a new field. It's getting a little jaded in the software industry, looking at the same type of problems. But coming into this a new field, and also which having much more impact, in our life, has been very exciting. And that excitement is what has been driving me.
And what drives you to do what you do?
I mean, the ability to solve these problems, right? Or at least having the dream that, even if you're not solving it today or tomorrow, what work that you're doing will in one way or the other help, in these solutions.
How do you relax when you're not working in your business?
I like to travel. Traveling and reading are my two major hobbies. So there are some areas I'm very interested in, like history, archaeology. Used to be the last maybe many years. I've been very passionate about that. So traveling to places where there are old ruins, looking at digs, that has been one continuous interest. Also, in the last few years, once I got into genomics, plants became an area of big interest. And I'm looking at the plants. They are even much more complex than mammals or human beings. They cannot move, so they are in one place, they stand. And so the evolution has worked much more in plants. And from a genomic and data point of view, it's very exciting and interesting. So I've been looking at more plants and visiting botanical gardens in different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. So that has been very enjoyable.
Do you have any entrepreneurial role models?
No, that has been something which I have not. Though I've been an entrepreneur all my life, somehow I could never look at people as role models. I mean, there are great people, and they're often an inspiration to us at many different times of life. But seeing one or two or a few people as role models somehow never appealed to me.
Sam, we've talked about your personal life and we've touched on your business a little bit as well. What I'd like to do now is go back in time to the time before you were an entrepreneur and talk about that with you. What difficulties did you have to overcome when you started your business?
Yeah, that is nearly 30 years back. Yep. And the time was very different. I was also come to the US at that time. I was in India. And the late 80s in India was, much more tougher than it is now. India had not gone through the liberalization phase. So the country was, much more backward than it is now. And entrepreneurship was not at all looked upon well. So even in my family or elsewhere, it was not considered something good to do. So people typically preferred a government job and working for something steady and stable. So it was very tough to get the support. To look at entrepreneurship and look at starting your own company, and also models for funding or venture capital, all that was also not there. So the startup life was much more difficult than it is now.
Did you have any doubts that delayed you starting your business?
Oh, sure. I was, I come from an academic family. We don't have an entrepreneurship or a business family. So funding was very difficult. To getting the initial funding and also getting a core team together. Like I said, people were very wary of startups. So good people would not come to, new companies or startup companies. So in my first innings, which I call the first, set of companies, it was very, very difficult to get money as well as the right people to work with you. So this would cause many delays. Mm-hmm.
And what mistakes did you make that slowed your journey?
Yeah, that would be a very long story because it has been a lot of mistakes. So that especially without a business background and without that that culture, it was I must have made a more mistake than most people that I know in every part of the business, problems with not choosing the right partners in the initial businesses. Not having aligned, you do not know that what are the challenges that come up. So, many of the vision or the roadmap or the risks, all these are not aligned. And so a lot of misunderstandings come. People don't want to then work with you or leave you. So those are a lot of mistakes and a lot of challenges I faced.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned not choosing the right partners. What tips have you got for people so that they do choose the right partners?
Yeah, again, there is no like a clear answer to that, or a silver bullet to that. Yeah. But at least acknowledging the challenges and having open discussions, right on the path of the company, the exit plans. How do you you might agree on the vision, you might have shared a vision, but what are the common thoughts on translating that vision, and and how much dilution you expect for that to happen over the course. So these are very important questions that needs to be addressed. But often you can do that in hindsight, but when you're starting your first company or the initial phases, you really don't pay too much attention to all that. You sort of assume that those will get solved or taken care of, as long as you have the right intentions. But often it doesn't happen that way. Even though your intentions are good, there can be so many different ways of interpreting it and so many different ways of solving problems. So if you're not aligned properly with your co-founders or initial employees as well as the initial investors, you are bound to have a lot of problems.
I think so many people, though, they choose their business partners and they put so little thought into it. And it's such a major decision, isn't it? Because you even if you've got somebody who's a good friend, when you go into business with that person, it's a different relationship you're fostering with them. And it can create all sorts of problems. And very often it ends in tears and your friendship ends up not being what it was before. And it's very difficult to avoid that. And unfortunately, people put too little thought into it.
Absolutely, yeah. Too little thought into it, and it happens to many of us or most of us that you really get into a very bad situations later due to nobody's fault. I mean, so that is even the most sad part of it. So it is not like somebody was bad or good or it is just the way that it was not aligned. Even simple things like risk profiles. I mean, you might be great friends, but you might not have really thought through or looked into your friend's risk profile, right? Mm-hmm. How much challenge they take, how much of the other problems, and so because things always don't go well, and when things go bad, how is it going to affect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it needs a lot of thought, and I think people need to really spend a lot of time getting to know the person and getting to know them from a different perspective than purely from a friendship point of view, if that's the way they're coming at it.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that you did before you started your business that will be helpful tips to some of the listeners who haven't yet taken the first step on the entrepreneur way?
I think some of it we just talked about, making sure that the core team, because starting alone is always tough. And so it's very good to have at least one or two co-founders. But getting the right people in and making sure you're all on the same page becomes very important. Then I think choosing the right funding source. Because not only is it important to get the money, but it is very important to make sure that that is also very well aligned and you share the same values and the same goals, and also importantly the timeline as well. So if these things are also not very well aligned, you are not you're not going to have it very smooth. But very importantly, I would say really make sure that you are ready and to get into becoming an entrepreneur and having your company, because a lot of people just talk about the good side of it or the excitement. But to be really frank, it is such a hard work, right? Mm-hmm. And it is for you're committing yourself to something which at the minimum is about maybe 5 years, but most of the time it will be about 8 to 10 years before you get an exit out of it. And it is something which you are making a major commitment, which will affect your family, your free time, your financial situation. So all this is a big commitment. So you have to be really, really sure that that is what you want to do, and the area that you've taken up also is of interest and excitement to you. That will keep your interest, and you won't regret it. As you are going through the good and the bad.
You mentioned choosing the right funding sources. What advice have you got for people on that?
Yeah, I would say that, it is very, very important that you try as much as not to take money from close friends and relatives who are not really businessmen. I know it's a very tough thing to say, because when most of us start, we are forced to depend on friends and relatives. But as much as possible, I would say to avoid that, or even if you do that, really make sure that they are getting into it with their eyes open, because often friends or relatives who give you money don't really fully understand the risks, and they are more or less trusting you than actually investing. So even if you're taking that, then really have in your mind that it is okay. It's really a loan. It's not really an investment, and you are personally bound to repay that. So that is at the very early stage when you're looking at like what now typically is called angel funding, but till very recently that was not there, and the angel funding was mostly through friends and family. Mm-hmm. At the next stage, also, when you're really getting into the professional funding at a VC for venture capital funding, also I would say it's very important that you choose the right firm who are into that area and who have shared your vision in building a solution to that specific problem or set of problems that your company is addressing. If that is not aligned also, you might have some money, but many of the other challenges that you face down the line, this may not be the right partner for you.
What we're going to do now is move forward on the timeline and talk about the time from when you started your entrepreneurial journey as an entrepreneur. Do you think culture is important from the beginning in a business?
Oh, absolutely. I think, in fact, once I got into biology, we say that the DNA of your company is set in the very beginning, right? Mm-hmm. And that DNA becomes very important. And sometimes after some time, it becomes practically very difficult to change the DNA of your company. So even if it's your own company, once something is set up, it becomes difficult. So the culture and on what are the things that you believe in, what are the priorities of the company, and the lines that you are not willing to cross. So these are things that will have to be very well set up, and understood in the company, so that everybody pulls in the same direction.
So everyone, you've heard it from someone who's an expert in genomics. The DNA of your company is set in the beginning. So it has to be true. And it is true.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that you hire the right people so that they fit with the culture in your business?
Oh, that is the toughest one, and I don't think me or anybody else has ever solved it or will ever solve it, because you get so little time when you're looking to hire people, and you might have maybe instead of 2 or 3, maybe more interviews, and you might have a lot of discussions. But at the same time, it is very, very difficult. So I still see it as something like, a lot of it is just like potluck. You try your best, be as transparent and as open as possible. But it's still something which you will need to really work together and figure out. So my suggestion or solution to it has been to not really come up with a solution to hire the best or the right people, but quickly make sure after you hire that at least in the next 3 to 6 months that you don't prolong the agony. And if it is not working out, whatever reason, it would be much better to limit the damage and separate quickly.
I think you should be trying to find the perfect employee gene.
Yep. That is what we would all like, but
knowing what you know now, is there anything that if you'd known it when you started out that would have helped you to shortcut the learning curve?
Yeah, but some of it we already mentioned, like I said, choosing the right partner. Those are things I have made mistakes on, which now I would have completely different conversations with my friends and early partners before we jumped into the business ventures together. Similarly, funding also has been something which I mentioned, which I have also made mistakes, taking the wrong type of funding or. So those are many of the mistakes or some of the mistakes that I would typically avoid in the next round or the next set.
How much does gut feeling influence the decisions in your business?
Gut feeling is whether you accept it or not or acknowledge it or not, it drives all of us to a very large extent. As I learned biology, I realized that a lot of the decisions that we think that we are taking in a very logical or rational manner are maybe even quickly decided by some parts of our brain much before that even we are aware of it, right? So it's not. So it's a very complex thing, and I think often then rationalize right after you take a decision. So as human beings, we all tend to have some immediate feelings which we are all influenced by.
What makes you uncomfortable as an entrepreneur?
Often, like I said earlier, when we have to have the conversations with the people when we made the wrong choices or wrong decisions in hiring. So letting people go is one of the most uncomfortable things that you're forced to do. But this happens pretty often, especially in companies in the early stages when you have to do it yourself. So those have been some of the most toughest times that I have had when people, sometimes even good people, whose thought process or whose things are not aligned with what you want to do or what you feel is good for the company, and you are forced to take those decisions.
And what do you think are some of the secrets to success?
The most important thing which I personally feel is to being able to learn. So learning continuously, I think, is one of the most important things in this, especially in this new knowledge economy. So things are happening at such a fast pace. So there is not much of an opportunity for you to rest on what you know, like the earlier generation when you finished learning at one phase and then the rest of your life would be applying what you learned. But now that has changed. So I think the most important thing will be to have that ability and hone that ability to learn continuously.
Life is made of constant change, whether we like it or not. And many people say that the only constant in life is change. Sam, how do you try to keep up with change?
No, I think me and I think most entrepreneurs love change, right? I mean, we are there, and our existence is also to a large extent being enabled by the fact that things are changing and they change fast and keep on changing. So I think being in a position to drive that change, I think empowers you, and that is what it's also a very exciting thing. So, we embrace that. I think that the fact that things keep changing and really look for opportunities where you can take the leadership there.
What is your favorite book on entrepreneurialism, business, personal development, leadership, or motivation? And can you tell us why you have chosen it?
Well, it's not like one book. So, and I love reading. So, I read maybe about 4 or 5 books a month. So keeping, and across various subjects. So science is something which again, in the last maybe 8-10 years has been a big passion. So I read a lot of books on science, and some of the good books there from well-known people like, Craig Venter, Eric Topol, Francis Collins, all these these authors, Richard Dawkins, have been very, very, useful and encouraging for people like us to learn and to follow.
Folks, when you have a busy life, listening to audiobooks is a great way to expand your knowledge in the time when you may be doing other things, such as driving or when you are at the gym. We have a special offer for you of a free audiobook of your choosing. To choose your free audiobook, go to www.freeaudiobookoffer.com. As long as you've not already signed up, then you will qualify. Sam, are you ready to speculate about the future?
I can try.
Oh, yes, that's good. What one thing would you do with your business if you knew that you could not fail?
I think I would plunge into maybe looking at some new drugs to develop. We are in the phase where we can look at understanding the biology of the disease and finding out why something goes wrong. But if I assure that that I would succeed in some of the new things, I would plunge into building or creating new drugs.
What skill, if you were excellent at it, would help you the most to double your business?
It is, again, the recruiting, hiring the right people. That is one which we are all rather weak at. And if I could be much better at identifying the right people and motivating them, I think that can grow the business much, much faster.
How can you get better at that?
I wish I knew that, but I think that's also a learning process.
You're figuring out DNA. You must be able to figure this out.
Yeah. But I think it's a lot of it is, transparency and articulating the vision and being able to explain, what you really want to do and how do you expect that to happen. Yeah. And then also having the willingness to listen back and learn from what others are telling you.
In 5 years from now, if a well-known business publication was publishing an article on your business after talking to your customers and suppliers, what would you like it to say?
Oh, I'd be very thrilled that if they said that we made a difference in the industry.
We are now at the part of the show where you share 3 golden nuggets with us. Sam, what is your favourite quote and how have you applied it?
My favorite quote is something which I made up. I think I made up. I say that if you don't read, you can't lead.
Okay.
So I guess every leader should be continuously reading. So like I said earlier, that's why I read a few books, at least a few books a month. So that is how I have been putting that into practice.
Yeah. Every leader is a reader, but not every reader is a leader. That's also true, isn't it?
That's also true. Yeah.
Do you have any favourite online resources you can share with us?
I've been often looking at the MOOCs site, the online learning sites. I think Coursera is very good. I've been using that often to learn about the new subjects or new areas that I come across.
And what is your best advice to other entrepreneurs?
Some of it we already mentioned, like choosing the right team and the right investors. But to add on to that, I would say be very clear about your exit plan and also make sure that you don't get diluted too fast. So my rough rule of the thumb, I try to tell entrepreneurs and, early businessmen that you should hold on to at least 50% of your equity for the first 5 years, you and your core team. So that will allow you to make sure that you have control of the company and you don't end up, having too little at the end of the day.
Folks, if you didn't manage to get a note of Sam's favourite resource or his favourite books, you can find the links on Sam's show notes page. Just go to theentrepreneurway.com and search for Sam or Sam Santhosh in the search box. Sam, is there anything else that you would like to add about your business?
Not really. I think we have covered up pretty much, Neil. Thank you very much.
Sam, it really has been an honour having you on the show today. Thank you for coming on and talking about MedGenome and genomics, which is a new word to me today, so I hadn't come across that one, so I feel like I've expanded a little bit. But also talking about things that we have talked about before, things like funding, starting with the right business partners, and the DNA of business culture. And you've also shared lots of great advice on lots of other things as well. So thank you very much for coming on the show today. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Neil.
You are welcome, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Entrepreneur Way. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Twitter @Neil D. Ball.